So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is going to be about viewer licensing agreements for sure. It is for use out of our EQuIS enterprise. But I'll start with saying, why does this government group? Why do you care about that? And there are an increasing number of new regulations that have public-facing data reporting requirements, and I've just highlighted a couple of those examples here. We're seeing this come up many times now with these new regulatory frameworks where we want to give access to the public for some viewing of these data. And so the first one that I've highlighted here is the coal combustion rule, which let me switch over here to that here. Here is the website for compliance data and information websites required for the disposal of coal combustion residuals. So here's one of the new requirements here for this coal combustion reporting that has a public-facing part of the regulation. Second one that I've highlighted here is just the California Water Resources Group that has reporting for this Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, they're calling it. And this is for drinking water, public water sources in these different segments around California. And here's a section here on the data tools that are required for that reporting. So just a couple of examples and some sites where, this is now becoming a regulatory issue. I'll go back up one to our agenda. So the agenda is going to be, what is a viewer license? What types of licensing agreements do we have? And then some more information about those licenses. So the VLA, these are available to you. You can request these or go on our website and you can download them, about the viewer licensing. So there's really two kinds of viewer licenses, and I'll go into that here pretty quickly. This is third-party access to EQuIS. What does that mean? Third-party means our licenses generally are for a particular entity, a government agency in the case that we're talking about here today. Could be an industry, could be one of our consultants, but the licensee of EQuIS. Third-party access means they're not the licensee, but the licensee is granting access to EQuIS. And in order to do that, you need licensing. You need to request licensing from us. The viewer licensing does come with some fees. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But these are easily accessible. How do you do it? It is exactly what it says, is a viewer license. And so you're going to be providing these third parties with views via EQuIS Enterprise into the data sets that you own. So again, two kinds of, if you will, flavors of the viewer licensing. The first one is the pay per user. It's a simple one where we say, in order to provide some third party, someone outside of your organization as the licensee, access to data through enterprise dashboard and widgets that we have preset, we can give them username and password and have them allow them access through setting them up with this username and password access. That is in contrast to the project or public viewer licensing, which is it doesn't require a username and password. It's set up for public viewing through a URL. And that is for anybody and everybody, because generally for these public views, you can't license each individual that might be accessing the site. We don't know who they are. They're homeowners, they're people in the community, they're outsiders that are not identified individually, and therefore we have overall access that's much more general. Okay, so those are really the two categories. I'll dive in a little bit here on some of the details. Again, individual, unique, single sign-ons here, sign-on and username and password, no sharing of credentials. The consumption is a monthly consumption for how the charges occur. So if no one, for instance, with this viewer pay-per-use license logs in for the particular month, then there are no fees to be associated with it. So these are monthly subscriptions that are backward-looking in payment, and we're suggesting here quarterly usage reports. We can make that whatever time frame that makes sense for you, but that seems to make some sense to most folks. Do that 4 times a year, and that seems to be good for folks. So backward looking, you're going to run a report, and I'll show you what that report looks like here in a second, that says how many outside of how many folks, these third parties, actually took advantage of their viewer licensing over the course of that period, and then payments are based on that number. Fees start at $30 per month, and of course that's not with government discounting. Government discounting has 25% discount on that, so you would start at $22.50 for the on-premise versions, which most of our government accounts are on-premise. The EQuIS Online accounts are $40 licensing, which for government discounts are $30 per month, and then they go down based on volume, up to 60% discount for volume over, in addition to those charges that I just mentioned. And I think that's about all to be said about that. Project viewer licensing is viewable, as it says here, for facilities across a facility. It's not unique user licensing, but it's authorized use for particular entity. You're using common logon credentials, which usually are bypassed, and that's a setup with that we can help you through. Get a bunch of pop-ups here. The discounts do apply here as well. So we start with on-premise at $1,000 per month and $1,200 per month for the EQuIS Online viewers, which again are discounted by 25%, so $750 and something like $900. The payments we'll talk about later of how does that work with maintenance renewals. But those are the kind of selections you can have with viewer licensing. The sample that I have here of a quarterly usage report looks like this, where this report can be run out of Enterprise and generate this report that says how many users did we have. Month 1 we had 2, month 2 we had 3, month 3 we had 11 users. That turns into these dollars, which winds up generating an invoice here for this amount, and you send us a check. The discounts are shown here as well. You can see it goes up to 60%, as I said. So all of that is, the calculator does all that for you. Security is one of the things that I was asked to address. The cloud hosted versus on-premise security. For our cloud hosting, we're subject to Azure. We're using Azure, and so Azure, we're subject to their security requirements and their security overview. That security includes the the one requirement that you guys in the government agencies care about, which is FedRAMP compliance. That's a requirement to be that all government sites that are externally hosted have to meet in order to be secure. So that's an easy one to answer. On-premise is you're subject to your own security. I can't really address that. That would be your own IT is responsible for security there. I think one of the key things here for discussion was, inside or outside your firewall. So which way to set up a public-facing access to these views. A couple of ways. One, a simple way is just to use your current instance, that you have set already for enterprise, and provide viewership, either one of these two, pay-per-use or public view, on that system and give access. Problem with that can be that a couple of things. One is hackers then have the ability to, if they choose, see anything and everything that's in the database that you have, outside of the things that you have set up for them to view. Another one is if it's your production server, then external users could take down your server and for whatever abuse reasons, and now you're out of luck to use that. So for a couple, either one of those reasons or both of those reasons, we find that a lot of folks like to set it up as a separate instance that is updated on some frequency. So you push it out to the second outside the firewall in some DMZ area, once a month, once a quarter, whatever you think the right frequency is for this third-party viewing, including public viewing, so that you don't have the issue with your own internal use server that you're using for everything else. And it separates it out from all the other data that you have access to. Okay, so that's what I have to say about purposes of multiple instances or a single instance. The next slide here is about roles and permissions. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. Suffice it to say, one of the questions that we get is, how do I limit what these views are? And that's by utilizing the administrative roles and permissions area in enterprise that you use for setting up your own internal folks for user-based access. And for those of you who know how to set them, then this will be old hat. For those of you who don't, then it'll be good for you to see how that works. Renewals is another question mark. So renewals depends on, as it says here, whether you're pay-per-use or the project or public viewer. It can be set up so that you run these reports and then pay them on some quarterly basis. We can also assign them so that at your renewals you pick some a version, a number of seats, if you will, for the pay-per-use, or the public viewer is its own fee that doesn't change based on usage. And we can settle those up on whenever you set up your annual agreements on an annual basis for most of you, or we can do them on a quarterly basis. So that's how VLAs work for payment and renewals. And I think that's it for me.